Hey, welcome everyone. You've clicked on to the Tuesday evening edition of Weather for Weather Geeks. This is the Valley's most in-depth weather forecast video, and these videos of late have been a little bit shorter than I would say what the average is, because we just haven't had a lot of real impactful weather of late to spend a lot of time analyzing. So when we have a quiet weather day, I tend to try to dig up some interesting facts and give you some information and add some value that you're not going to see in other places. And well, I did look back at the record books today to see what happened in February after the 20 warmest December-January combos. We're probably heading for a top 10 this season as far as warm December-January combos. What happened in February? Well, 55% or 11 out of 20 of those years, February ended up being more of the same, warmer than average. 30% of those 20 were colder than average, and about 15%, or just a few of them, were about average. So the odds favor, from a climatological perspective, from a historical perspective, if you will, odds favor the pattern continuing right into February. But sometimes the pattern does flip, and sometimes it flips really hard. Back in the winter of 2005 into 2006, that's an example of where we had a warm December-January combo, and then the pattern flipped in February, got really cold in February. So it can happen, just it doesn't seem to happen with as much frequency as the times in which the warm pattern just continues into February. Just a reminder, all of our winter months are warmer than they used to be. All of our months of the year are warmer than they used to be, but it's especially noticeable in the winter season. Our average temperatures are now almost 4 degrees warmer in January than the averages were 30 years ago, and February is very similar. Now, the warming throughout the rest of the year is not nearly as pronounced. It's still there, but it's not nearly as pronounced in the other seasons other than winter. Boy, I showed you this graphic last night. Ever since the weekend, temperatures have hardly budged. It's been 32, 33, or 34 degrees for something like, I'd have to go back and look, but it's something like 72 hours plus at this point, where we've had almost no variety in our temperatures. This can happen in the dead of winter when you have a low overcast, no fronts coming through, no air mass change. The sun angle is important even when it's cloudy, and when the sun is pretty low in the sky, it just can't provide enough energy for there to be any substantial warming, and then the clouds prevent temperatures from cooling off much during the nighttime hours. So we see this sometimes in the winter season, much more unusual at other times of the year. All right, our little drizzle and flurry storm continues out there this evening. It is not much, and it continues to not be a whole lot on the radar, but this is one of those situations in which the cloud deck is so low, the precipitation is falling from such a low level that the radar beams are overshooting it, so it's not showing up as much on the radar. I stepped outside right after the 6 and moved my car, and it's precipitating at a pretty decent rate. Even a little accumulation of snow on my car, and then there's a few raindrops trying to mix in as well. Here in our television viewing area, we're roughly halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and also about halfway between the Cleveland and Pittsburgh National Weather Service Doppler radars. So because of the Earth's curvature, by the time that radar beam gets to our location, it's a few thousand feet up at least. In some places, it's as much as 5,000 feet up. So precipitation that's falling below that level, the radar has a hard time seeing it. All right, I think we're going to lose the drizzle and flurries tomorrow. Now, our model here is kind of aggressive with trying to dry out the atmosphere a little bit from the northeast. I think this is probably a little optimistic, but I would not be surprised if the sky tries to brighten some on Wednesday, especially compared to the just very low overcast, gloomy weather we've had over the last couple of days. Any breaks in the sun tomorrow, pretty short-lived. I think Thursday is going to be a mostly cloudy day as a little disturbance just scoots by off to our south, maybe bringing a touch of precipitation from Wheeling on south. And then Friday, guess what? More clouds. Pretty uneventful weather otherwise. I'm not expecting this drizzle and flurry pattern, or snizzle, to continue. Here's the model spread again for the next week. As far as snow goes, all of our models are under an inch. We might have some rain and snow showers on Saturday, but I'm expecting really nothing as far as impactful snow over the next week, and probably even 8 or 9 or even 10 days. It's going to take a little bit of time for this pattern to shake loose some sort of a wintry or a winter storm or anything impactful, really. A quick look at the CFS model this evening. We're looking at the upper level flow here, and this is not a warm pattern for the east, but it's not a cold one either. We have some ridging along the west coast, but the ridge does not extend up into Alaska or crossing the pole or anything like that. It's a pretty wimpy ridge. Now, as we go into the month of February, I think what you see is what you get probably through at least the first week of February. Beyond that, there are some signals on some of the modeling, and including this set of modeling, that that ridge is finally going to start poking far enough north that it's going to force down some troughing across Canada, the Great Lakes, and into the Northeast, and that would allow for some colder times. Sharply colder, dramatically colder, polar vortex kind of cold? No, probably not. But some colder times, yes, for the middle of February. There's pretty good model agreement on this at this point, that beyond, say, sometime between February 7th and 10th, beyond that, towards Valentine's Day, it'll at least be a pattern that has some potential for maybe some wintry weather and somewhat colder than we've gotten used to. So with this kind of configuration, with the ridge poking up into the Gulf of Alaska and even through Alaska and maybe even across the pole, you do open yourself up to lobes of the polar vortex and escaping the polar regions and coming down into at least the northern part of Hudson Bay, into northern Quebec. If that's the case, then winter's not done. You know, there's a lot of winter left. I'm not throwing in the towel on winter completely at this point, but what you see is what you get, I think, for at least the next week to 10 days. It's just not a pattern that's going to produce a lot of snow days for the kids and teachers, and it's not the kind of pattern that's going to bring a lot of super interesting midwinter weather to eastern Ohio and western PA. That'll do it for me tonight. More updates on the short range and long range here on Weather for Weather Geeks on Wednesday evening. Enjoy the rest of your night.